Yeah, one of the main reasons I asked you to come on the show, you've kind of gotten a reputation among your hunting buddies as being great at finding the birds and being really good at scouting. So I want to take a
Thanks.
deep dive into scouting. Do you have any baseline tactics that you kind of start with everywhere, or are you kind of mixing it up as the situation calls for?
Oh man. Well, I gotta say um, I've been really blessed. God's really blessed me just with great hunts, but also with the people that I know. And I think almost the best scouting tool is the number of people you know and who you can talk to. You can share information with your friends, that can help out a lot. But then just being willing to travel has made a big difference in success this last season or two, maybe. For example, we were froze up for about a month, but if you drove 3 hours, you were going to shoot ducks. So, and we kind of figured that out. My group figured that out and capitalized on it. But I think for me, I'm just bouncing off, getting to know as many people as possible, sharing information, and then putting as many miles on as possible.
So what's that look like when you head out to an area? Why are you picking that area, and kind of walk us through what you're looking for?
Well, it kind of varies on maybe weather and time of year, what the birds are using. Let's see. As ice is coming on and off, that changes how the birds move. A lot of times midday, if there's ice in the morning, they're going to be on the big water or ponds. And then if it warms up during the day, like mid-morning or afternoon, they're going to go back to probably shallow water marshes. Things that there's a lot of vegetation in, because that freezes up first, but it also thaws out first. So they're going to go back to that in the afternoon. And being in this area, I've just kind of got to see the patterns of birds. And so I kind of know, like, this time of the year, they're probably going to be here, or, this area is better this time during the season. So me moving to Nebraska is going to be a total game changer. So I'm going to have to really relearn to scout. But I guess kind of I like to know all the areas within an hour, hour and a half of me really, really well. And then I want to keep track of precipitation in those areas, because if a lake comes up, that's going to be like, okay, yeah, we need to go look there, because the birds already know that the water's come up, and because there's fresh food, so they're probably going to be there. So does that kind of answer your question? Like, it's such a broad question, and it almost goes by early season, mid, and late. So
you're relying a lot on kind of historical data that you've observed in the past, and then kind of fleshing it out from there.
Yeah. And I guess in the moment, like, if you show up to an area, I'd say we kind of just like to sit and watch what the birds are doing and walk in. Sometimes there's been multiple times where maybe you'll sit in the parking lot and it doesn't seem like anything's going on, but if you walk in, yeah, it's a mile, but on that walk in, you may see birds trading over here and you didn't even know there was a spot over there. Or, it's worth the time to walk in.
Sure.
You're going to gain some sort of information, whether it's on the vegetation that's there or water level. You're going to gain probably something useful.
Right. So fast forward into, you're talking about learning a new area in Nebraska. How are you going to start that? Are you incorporating some e-scouting ahead of time, or relying on some local information, or how are you going to get started with that?
Yeah, I'm going to use Onyx a lot, and I'm going to pin as many things as possible. Areas, I'm going to go back and look at, like you said, the time lapse of what the areas look like during the fall and winter and spring and summer. And then I'm going to go put boots on the ground, hopefully this summer, and see as many of these places as possible. And then go from there and see what the vegetation is like. I think that's important. And on the rivers, I'm going to go back and look and see how the river fluctuates. And then when I'm there, I'm going to write that water level down. That way, when I go back, I can look at the water level and see how that compares to when I was there last. Because that'll tell me if the lake or river, if what I'm looking at is going to be the same or if it's going to be drastically different.
So you can do this all on OnX. You can check the river levels and water levels of the marshes and things.
Well, Onyx doesn't have water levels for that. It's probably going to be the USGS data website. Okay. And they'll have a gauge for the river or township. And then, let's see, as far as the lakes, if it's here in the state, if there's a Corps of Engineer lake, then they'll have the current lake levels on there.
Okay. So what else can you get from OnX by looking on the past data that they have?
Seeing what areas collect water. Oh, hold on one second. I need to give this. We caught some fish. I need to give them to my friend real quick. He's stopping in. I'll be right back. Sorry about that.
No problem.
But I'm sorry. I totally forgot the question. Could you say it again?
No, you were talking about going back and seeing on OnX which areas collect water and when.
Yeah, I like to look back at the recent imagery on Onyx. You can, at least on my phone, I think it's the bottom right. You can click it to look back at the imagery, and then it's pretty much, there's one image per month, or like 2 to 4 week time span. And then that'll show you which areas maybe held water that are dry, maybe when you're there.
Okay.
And then, like for here, smartweed patches are like a reddish brown in like October, November. So that's a really good indicator that there's at least a wetland soil there. So it may not hold water all the time, but if you get a rain event, that area may be wet.
Sure.
So it's useful information to have.
Yeah. And then you just follow that up with boots on the ground, like you said, later on when you're trying to figure out where to go the next couple days.
Yeah, try to. Or, I think letting the birds tell you where to go is key as well. I mean, hunt where they are.
Yeah.
So.
And for that, you're just hitting the road and seeing where you dumb into them at.
Yeah. Normally, when we see a big cloud of ducks, that's where we want to hunt.
Right.
And it sounds silly, but yeah, we put a lot of miles on this last season. I can think of a couple times where it was like, okay, yeah, we could have hunted there where there was a few, but it's like, that is the spot. And it doesn't normally last very long. So you got to
Right.
strike while the iron's hot.
So are you keying in on certain times of the day when you're looking for those clouds or groups of ducks? Or is it just kind of whenever you get there and see what you're dealing with?
I mean, if I can get somewhere right away at, 30 minutes before, I like to. A lot of times, maybe that shows you, if you can see the birds flying, that can show you where they're roosting and where they're going to go. So sometimes all you got to do is get under them to traffic them. And of course, it's helpful to maybe have a few guys and a big decoy spread and multiple callers to run traffic. But if you can get under them, but each area is different, so sometimes you just got to stay somewhere for a weekend or go back to it because you're like, well, I know we can get them here. Haven't figured them out yet. I know we can. Each area is very, very different. And so it's hard to, generalize it. Like if I was to come to Pennsylvania, I don't even know where I would start. I mean, I'd start on Onyx for sure. Onyx and Google Earth. But other than that, I don't know. I don't know how to tell you. But the way we're kind of set up in the Midwest is there's generally a wildlife area, like a reservoir. Mm-hmm. And that's where you want to start. And then find, just go from there. So.
Okay.
Sometimes, if you drive around if you spend a day there and you don't see anything, you probably just want to go check the next reservoir maybe.
Right.
And it can change. It can be drastically different. There can be one area that's got them and one area that doesn't.
Sure.
So it may not necessarily be dry, bird-wise, like everywhere.
Right. So you mentioned Google Earth. How's that helping you? What are you looking for on there?
Well, similar to Onyx, it's the history, like the previous history layer, it's a little bit sharper image.
Okay.
Like if you want to go back and look at December of 2017, Onyx, I think, only, and I may be wrong, I think Onyx only goes back like a year right now. And at least on my phone, it's pretty blurry. Google Earth is going to have a more crisp image. And then also your cursor on Google Earth will have the elevation. So a general elevation anyway, which can be useful. So, and that may just be in like the bottom corner of your screen.
Okay.
But as you're scrolling, maybe, around the lake, if you want to check like elevations of a field that may or may not hold water after a precipitation event, that could be useful.
Right.
And I've used that for scouting. So.
Okay. So thinking back when you started waterfowl hunting and started kind of figuring out your own scouting, can you point to any examples of any mistakes that you made that you look back now and think, man, if I would have known this, I would have really made a big difference back then?
Yeah, I'll start with an example from this year, and I'll see if I can recall I'm sure I've made tons of mistakes, but there was one weekend this year when I wanted to go duck hunting, of course. I wanted to go. But I had a feeling just in me. It may have been from the Holy Spirit that maybe I should stay home this weekend. And sometimes I get feelings like that. And it almost always, I should have listened to that. Because it was like, we hunted all weekend, Saturday and Sunday. We didn't shoot anything. And I went there off of 2-week-old information, or maybe it was a week old, I don't remember. But it was old information. And so when I showed up, there was already like 30 trucks there. So I was late to the game. The water was already dropping, which a lot of times the water will come up. Ducks will follow that crest. And then when the water drops, the hunting's not going to be as good. The birds are going to move on. Which it can be good. Dewatering in the spring can be pretty good. But a lot of times they're following that crest. So that was one instance. And I don't know, maybe... Have you felt like that, where you feel like you shouldn't go?
Oh, yeah.
And you go, and it doesn't go very well? Or
Yeah. Yeah, and okay. It goes both ways. I've had times where I wasn't planning on going, and then something tells you need to get out there. But yeah. I've had both of those happen for sure.
Okay, good. I'm glad that you can identify with that as well. There was another time when I just had that feeling, and I went, and I ended up falling out of my kayak. I got soaking wet, and I was like,
"Oh, jeez!
I knew I shouldn't have gone today. I knew it." But I guess your question was mistakes that I've made.
Yeah, like, what would I do just stuff that you look back and stuff that you learn from that might help somebody else out.
I think sometimes you see an area so frequently that maybe you just take it for granted. You take something for granted because you see it all the time. Like Jake came up here a couple years ago, and this spot was loaded with ducks, and I'm like, man, I don't know how we're going to get out there. How we're going to get to him. And he's like, well, let's just do this. And I'm like, no, I don't think we should do that. And it was just like kind of common sense. It was a common sense thing. It's just, I don't want to give anything away necessarily because I feel like it could betray the spot a little bit.
Right.
But I had seen that area so many times, and yet I was kind of blind to the obvious just because I had never done it, and I just got ingrained that I was just going to go over here and do this instead of watch what the birds are doing and do that. So this is kind of, it helps to have a new set of eyes sometimes because we see different things, especially on an area that you're so used to seeing all the time.
Right.
And it's like, oh, well, that was really obvious. I don't know why I didn't think of that, but
sure.
I'd also say I was an awful duck caller when I started. I was atrocious. It was terrible. But my friend Elliot let me call on. He helped build me up. And, to new hunters, I just say, like, if you sound really awful, like on a duck call, like I did, practice. And I hope that, ask questions to the guys around you. Hopefully they're willing to help you out.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing you can't hide in the duck blind, and it's
Yeah, if you're an awful duck caller, it comes out.
right.
Everybody knows.
That's right. Yeah, and it's one of those things that I don't think people intentionally judge you on it, but it's just a main one of those main points that you can't, like I said, you can't hide from it. It is what it is. So
Yeah,
definitely practice, practice, practice for sure.
definitely in the off season practice, and um, yeah, and hopefully you have someone that you can bounce questions off of, because I don't think I didn't know that I was terrible until somebody took the time not to say, "Hey, Aden, you really suck at this," but hey, let's practice this together.
Right.
Or so that's something I've been really blessed with is good mentors. Jake and Elliot have really helped me grow as a duck hunter and caller. And yeah, I wouldn't be where I am as a duck hunter today without them. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge to have somebody that can kind of walk you through and like you said, bounce some stuff off of them and learn as you go.
yeah.
So let's talk some more about the weather and how that impacts your scouting. Are there any conditions, like if you're watching the weather, if something's rolling in, and any conditions that you're like, okay, boom, I got to go. This is something I got to take advantage of and get in the saddle here.
Well, overall, like wind and sun, it seems like mainly. I like sunny and windy. There's kind of what I'm looking for. Those are the best days to be out. Or like a major weather change. Like if the weather's going to be nasty, I'm going to be out duck hunting. Like there was one day this past season where we shot ducks in snow goose socks, and we were where they wanted to be, but I'm not sure that it would have necessarily worked on a light wind day, because they were just crawling to get to us. They weren't super high, but if there was a really light wind day and they were going to be above us circling a bunch of times, they were going to see us, because they would either come in low enough they wouldn't see us and we'd shoot them, or which was because of the wind, really. Or they would come up high enough and they would flare. And there's enough ducks there that it worked. But so standardly sunny and windy. Those are probably my favorite. And then if I can't have that, like I don't know, major weather event, high winds or a storm, something to change the ducks out of the routine.
Right.
Because ducks get in a routine when they hit an area, and if there's a storm or something to roll in that changes the routine, a wind switch from south to north, something like that, that'll change the routine, and then you can hopefully get them.
Right. So when you're talking about windy, is there a wind speed that you like to have that you consider, windy enough?
I'd say 13 to 20 is pretty optimal. If it gets at least windy enough, your decoys move, I would say. Because if your decoys aren't moving, then it's a lot easier for them, I think, to pick your spread out.
Oh yeah.
But I guess just personally, I like it a little bit windier. Kind of, it's just more forgiving for the hide as well, because you can make some movements and they may not see it, but there's benefits to both things, because kind of the epitome, or one of the coolest things as a duck hunter, is when you call and that duck just breaks its back to come to you, and it can't.
yeah.
It's a lot harder to do that on a really windy day for a duck, but if you get a light wind day and the duck gets to the corner, even at 40, 50 yards, and you call and it just breaks it back to come in, that's pretty awesome too. So, but what about for you in Pennsylvania? What are you looking for there?
Yeah, pretty similar. I mean, that's a great one that we focus in on is those opposite switches, like you said. It goes from several days of one wind, and then the fourth day, totally opposite wind direction. That seems to work out a lot. But yeah, we like to have 10 plus miles per hour for sure if we can. Makes a big difference, like you said, in your decoy spread and your hide. So yeah, pretty similar.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. And this area of Kansas is pretty unique because it's super windy. I don't know how many days we had that gusts were easily over 30 here. And if you get more on the eastern part of the state, there's almost significantly less wind. Like if it's going to be 10 to 20 mile an hour here, 3 hours east of here, it's probably going to be like 5 to 10. So it's kind of a unique area. So
Sure.
there's areas that are much less windy, it seems like, on average than here.
Right. So on the flip side of that, is there any conditions that you see coming that you say, you know what, I'm just going to catch up on my sleep and I'm not even messing with this tomorrow?
Yeah, if there's not going to be any wind, then if we've had a good run, then I may just sleep.
Okay.
Or if the birds have been stale for a while and it's been tough and there's not going to be any wind tomorrow, then I'm probably better off doing something else.
Sure.
Is that what you found in Pennsylvania as well?
Yep, for sure. Yeah, and the season, as you know, can get pretty long, and it's nice to catch those breaks when you can and get caught up for your sanity and your health. So it's good to pay attention to that.
Yeah, those are good days to spend with your wife and really show her how important she is, because I do a lot of hunting. So.